It's great to be here. Obviously, I would prefer if I was in person with Mumia Abu-Jamal walking freely in the streets of Philadelphia. That would be the best case scenario. Close to that, but not exactly, is the fact that the United Nations has finally weighed in with this important amicus brief. For a very long time, the United States of America has lectured the planet about human rights and democracy. It's made it a habit, in fact, of sanctioning countries that it claims are not democratic up to a certain democratic standard and so on. Over 30 countries, by the way, are under US unilateral and therefore illegal sanctions. They're illegal because they're not authorized by the United Nations. The United Nations is a body that comprises 193 countries who are treaty bound, and that's an important phrase. They are treaty bound to follow the UN Charter of 1945. The UN Charter is the greatest compromise document on the planet because 193 countries are treaty bound by that charter, and yet the charter is violated routinely. That's the reason why a number of important people from the United States submitted a text called "We Charge Genocide" in 1948 about the systematic attack at people of African descent inside the United States. This has a long history, this history of appealing to the United Nations. And finally, in a way, the United Nations has answered not only to the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal, but in fact, in a small way, to the great text called "We Charge Genocide" from 1948. Where does one even begin on this story? I mean, what is there left to say? The numbers say it all. United States is well known to be the world's largest per capita incarcerator of human beings. 2 million people. That's a fact. What is there to say? Do we need to talk about the disproportionality with which people of African descent and people of Latin American descent and so on disproportionately incarcerated? Do we need to get into that? By a long shot, disproportionately incarcerated. The numbers, in fact, say it all. Obscene numbers of people killed every year by the police departments of the United States. I mean, 1,000 people a year is the official statistic. That's about 3 people a day almost. The numbers say it all. What is one to say? And again, here, close look at those statistics done by the Washington Post, a venerable institution of the United States. It shows disproportionate killing of people of African descent, people of Latin American descent, and so on. The numbers say it all. What do we have to contribute to that? It's right there on the record. It's about time somebody took those numbers seriously. Well, the people in the United States know those numbers. Punctual protests every few years on the streets for this or that killing of one individual who exemplifies the killing of thousands of people. It was Michael Brown in 2014 in Ferguson. A cycle of protest starts against police violence. And then, just a few years later, the killing of George Floyd in 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement starts. Black Lives Matter, an important slogan. Almost 26 million people in the United States take to the streets. That's the largest mass demonstration in US history. In some ways forgotten. And I remember those protests. I remember seeing photographs. In the midst of those protests, Black Lives Matter, there were signs which said, "Free Mumia." Free Mumia, said the protesters in the Black Lives Matter protests around the horrendous killing of a man named George Floyd. Free Mumia. What did Mumia Abu-Jamal have to do with this? His is, in fact, an individual case. 41 years incarcerated. What does it have to do with something in 2020? Well, everything. In one respect, the slogan "Free Mumia" is a slogan that, as the United Nations recognizes, is about the person, Mumia Abu-Jamal, unjustly sitting in a prison for 41 years. In most countries, a life sentence is about 10 to 25 years. Most countries, civilized countries in the world, do not hold people to what in the United States is known the length of their natural life. That is inhumane. That's a human rights violation. Most countries, when people are sentenced to life, it's understood to be 10 years and then parole, or 25 years. 41 years, that's an atrocity. And the United Nations has recognized that. Free Mumia, it means free Mumia. But free Mumia also means something else. Because of the great compassion of Mumia Abu-Jamal, he has become a symbol not only of his own case, but of the case of systematic racism in the United States. Systematic racism, that phrase which one hears even from people in power in the United States. It means racism has corroded the entire system. The system lives on the basis of racism. That's what the system is. The system requires changing. A system of systematic racism lecturing the world about human rights and democracy? Stop. Look to yourself. Look to your own problems. Take seriously what the United Nations has said about the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal. Free Mumia. That's about Mumia Abu-Jamal, the individual. Free Mumia. That's about a system that is rotten and that is desperately crying out, cycle after cycle of protests. Black Lives Matter. Stop the violence. Stop police violence. Thanks a lot.